It's time for a special episode of Happy Landings with your host, Jay Nowak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now today, I'd very much like to come back here on Happy Landings because after all, the business surrounding Kaiju Force Neo Ecstatic Times just never stops coming. Does it? I didn't really think so. But anyways, before I start moving on to other subjects here, before it's time for me to move on to anything else, I basically would like to talk about a couple scenes that are pretty important throughout the whole series itself. Ecstatic Times is going to have 10 seasons, of course, but of those 10 seasons, there are in fact going to be a lot of moments in them, true moments that have in fact been captured throughout my life. This first scene that I got here is going to be from Season 3, which will take place in the year of 2012. This particular scene, which will take place in County Line, on the date of February 23rd, 2012. It'll essentially just be me and a few others moving roadblocks across the road. It'll essentially just be a little, I guess, rip-off of Toy Story 2. When the gang crosses the road disguised as traffic cones, and of course, cars start crashing and swerving around trying to avoid them. But of course, in the end, a truck with a set of pipes comes in. But in my version, a semi-truck will be rigged with explosives in the form of several thousand gallons of oil, flammable fuel. Of course, it would be the powers of that of a small hydrogen bomb. And it would be powerful, no doubt about that. So that's pretty much just what that is. And why don't I go ahead and move on to what Season 5's biggest thing is hopefully going to be. And what that is I basically got an episode called The Year Was 1999. It's basically just a little story that I bring back 15 years after it had originally happened, in October of 1999. I had parents, of course, that had plenty of run-ins with the law, especially when it came to driving on the roads. But this in particular is going to be a big one. Because after all, a parent of mine had a 75 Toyota Celica, bluish in color, two-door, and was pretty sporty looking at the time. And of course, I didn't really remember much that happened at the time, except that this parent of mine had simply outran the police. And I could always remember that throughout the last few decades, the police has really gone to terms with getting whatever types of police cruisers that they could find, or at least converting any kind of car that they could find into police cruisers. I would pretty much remember distinctly about being told, specifically, that a few different police cars would include an 87 Caprice, as well as a 59 Mercury, a 70 Honda motorbike, and a few others here and there. There were essentially a lot of old, beaten-up, broken cars that had been repaired and refurbished and restored to their original beauty. And then they were transformed into police cruisers for the Wisconsin State Force. And it's a tradition that still continues to this day, pretty much. But going back to the plot line there. So basically, my parent outruns the cops, even with at least a dozen cars from that force coming in. And then eventually, my parent comes on to some sort of a counterculture area. You see, even though it was decades after the Vietnam War had ended, there were still people out there who were crazed yuppies / hippies. Yep, it's something that we still get. But of course, it's not as stereotypical today as it was back then. And I can tell you for sure that there was a lot there to do with it. I could simply talk about every single police cruiser that had been used at the time, but yeah, I'm probably going into recent territory where it's a pretty big scale. Lots of old cars, newer cars, and cars that are fresh out of the factory can get converted into police cruisers and interceptors and even undercover vehicles. And it doesn't matter which it is, if it's foreign, if it lives in America or whatnot, but anyways. Now I'm going to have to go ahead and move on to another sensitive territory in the same year of 2014. I time travel back to 1995. That was a time where my parents had originally gotten married. And so by the end of that year, around the same time that Christopher Reeves was ready to go home from the hospital after the Eastern Express incident, that would be where marriage would first take place. And so I basically get transported back to that time to prevent a series of chronological incidents from taking place. You could say it's just a ripoff of Back to the Future Part 1, but to me, it's a different take on it. A much different take on it. Even though it has some of the same plot lines, outcomes, and the like, it's essentially just a different way to go when it comes to time travel. And finally, onwards to August of 2017. Basically, this was a time that I actually tried to create in real life. I basically brought out a Traxxas car that I've gotten for my birthday years back. And I still have it to this day. I just haven't used it since, well, that happened. I basically just took the car out to a large intersection that lots of cars were traveling on, and of course, I just simply had the car roll on into that area. I was able to get it all the way across, and yeah, nothing pretty much happened. Nothing happened amongst the many potential things that could have happened, like accidents or homicide or anything of that sort. But anyways, that's probably one of the most recent moments when it comes to Kaiju Force Neo Ecstatic Times that I felt like sharing with everybody. So those are things that are pretty much going to take place in the series themselves, and they'll just be reenactments of real life things. All but the time trial thing. Of course, the events that take place in the time trial thing, they're all real except for the part where I go back to 1995. Because that's just not the case. But anyways, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Kaiju Force Neo Ecstatic Times for a little while now. And I'll be going different places. All because of my duty. And all because of a lot of stuff that I have to work on. Until then, I'm Jay Nowak. This has been Happy Landings. See you again.